Please note, this podcast may be triggering to some as it discusses themes centered around emotional, physical, mental, and sexual violence. If you are a survivor or know someone suffering the effects of these issues, please take care while listening. Additionally, this podcast and content shared is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be used as a substitute for medical or mental health advice. Welcome to When Heaven Meets Hell. I'm your host, Allyn, and this is the retelling of my experience with narcissistic abuse and coercive control from my perspective. In this podcast, I unravel my storybook romance turned nightmare when an unexpected breakup revealed my fiancé's double life, including a massive web of lies, deceit, cheating, and betrayal. Together, with the help of world-renowned guest experts, we'll tackle the harsh realities of complex PTSD, trauma, and grief, illuminating these often overlooked issues and inspiring change for women facing these challenges. I do want to go ahead and provide an additional trigger warning for this episode in particular. We are going to be discussing some sensitive topics related to mental health, including but not limited to anxiety, depression, trauma, grief, and suicidal ideations. So please do take care while listening. I'm a firm believer that whether this has impacted you personally, it has definitely impacted someone that you know, whether it's your family, your friends, coworker. These issues are so extremely widespread. So it hits all of us, and I believe it hits home. So please just take care of yourself while listening. Take breaks, pause if you need to, and reach out for support. Your well-being is most important, so give yourself the grace and space while moving through this episode. Today I woke up, and I will be so honest that I said I don't want to. The thought ran through my mind of I don't want to do this. And not in the sense of I don't want to be here with you guys, because I love this opportunity and I do not take it for granted for 1 second. It means the world to be able to have this platform and share my story and be welcomed with such open arms, and to be able to speak for so many of us and put words to these experiences. But my alarm went off, and obviously I'm also just a sleepy girl for life. And so you're tired, and I was like, I don't want to do this. Flip side of that too is I have definitely been dragging my feet more on these episodes, which sounds counterintuitive, but I think we're kind of getting to the point where it's more into the healing and the feelings and a little less of the facts and the timeline. And not to say that what I'm going to share the rest of the series is not facts. This is all facts and truth and exactly as my story happened. It's almost a little bit easier, even though what we've discussed thus far is horrific, but it's almost a little bit easier for me to lay out a timeline and facts exactly as it happened, as opposed to kind of getting into unraveling the free fall that was healing and the immediate aftermath of everything, because it just feels so chaotic, and it felt like there was no time or space or anything, and you were just lost. And I know I've said this before. I believe the first episode kind of really explaining what When Heaven Meets Hell is to me, and I know that everyone kind of has their own iteration of that, but this episode in particular, this even few days in particular, is really what that represents to me, is just a suspended state of chaos, confusion, pain, loneliness, isolation, grief, and a lost sense of self. There was no human left in me. So it's hard to put words to that, is what I'm saying, as opposed to before, earlier episodes, I can lay out all of that a little bit easier. So before every episode, as I've said before I speak, I always pray. And today I prayed especially hard just that the words will come through as they need to and as they're supposed to, because there's so much to say here. There's a lot of different ways that this can go, and how do you explain something so vast and deep and dark as grief and betrayal? And so I'm going to do my best to hit on that with you guys. And the thought hit me of I don't want to do this, and I'm also at the same time, God reminded me that I am, to the day, almost a few days away, oddly enough, when this episode comes out, 1 year out of this happening. So 1 year out of this breakup, of what I'm about to detail out here, of getting home, of trying to sort out my life, all of this stuff. It's almost a year to the day. We're in the ballpark of a year to the week. Something that I could not have planned. This timeline has just happened, and I've just been on this path and leaned into it and trusted it and felt like I've been called to share this story, and am leaning into it. But it is not lost on me how freaking bizarre it is. So today I am leaning into that stretchiness and discomfort, not because I'm not moved past a lot of this, but just because it's difficult to find the words and do it justice for you guys. But I feel like I today am choosing to speak for the year ago version of me. And, I laid in bed today. I was like, oh, I do not want to get up. Would rather do something else. And I'm also reminded that, about a year ago is when I was in bed, just unable to move with this sadness and this grief. And that was such a terrible, terrible, dark time that I will talk about. And how blessed I am that this is the dilemma of my day now, as opposed to last year when I thought that so much of my life was over. And so just some perspective, I guess, on that. So I'm choosing to speak for her and what I wish I had a year ago, and hoping that this helps the person who might be in that position now, or will be, or who is going through this, facing that. So today we are choosing to speak for you and speak to you. I want to read a quote. We'll see if I can get through reading after last episode. Jordan B. Peterson, I really, really like him. He has a quote that I want to start off with. He says, "If you betray me, I have to see you differently, and I've built up a hell of a model of you, and it's taken a tremendous amount of effort to generate, and it's a predicate for other plans, which is what you do with an intimate relationship. So if you do something that indicates a true mismatch, it isn't that I have to adjust my actions. I also have to retool my perceptions of myself. I am more gullible, and God only knows those implications. If you're close to me and you could do this to me, what does that flaw mean? Who am I that this happened, and who are other humans that they could do this to each other? Who are humans that there is this capacity for the magnitude of betrayal? That's a dreadful realization." So that is a quote of his. It perfectly tees up this episode. It perfectly tees up my mental state in all of this. And really, when I heard this, it wasn't until, months into this, but I was like, thank God. And I remember I left Montana. I had a layover in Seattle. I remember I'm wearing my my sweatsuit and my sunglasses, and I'm wearing the sunglasses, and it's like a thing that my nieces do sometimes, where it's kind of the thing where you squint so hard that you hope you can disappear and no one will see you. Or sometimes, they've worn sunglasses and we're like, no one, it's magic, no one can see you. And I think that was kind of me hoping that was true, even though it's an adult woman walking through the airport in public in broad daylight with sunglasses on, and it's, you're calling for attention at that point. But I did not care at all. I just wanted to sink away. And you walk through life now not trusting other people, but also not trusting yourself. And that's the absolute lowest and worst feeling ever. And I remember I got off and I had this layover, and I went, and I'm fully dressed, fully clothed, sitting on the toilet in the bathroom and on the phone to my mom, crying, saying, I can't do this. I cannot do this. And I reached a point where it was like, where do you even begin to try to start or fix anything? I mean, the relationship was not even a question. It wasn't even an anything. That was far gone, long gone. It's almost like it hit me of, oh my Lord, this is an evil, evil world that we live in, that this happened, but also, how did I let this happen? And that's the worst feeling, to be that disappointed in yourself. And it's a massive error in yourself, your judgment, your perceptions. And that's what I felt. And I just remember saying, you need to put me somewhere. I need to go somewhere. I can't navigate this. This isn't just, I am going to be over this quickly. This is a massive, it's like you are completely starting over kind of thing. It was just the worst and most honest conversation I probably ever had. I know that broke her heart. And it was just, and I'm grateful for it. And I have the best support ever. And it was just, let's get you home and we'll have these conversations. Let's just get you home and have these conversations. And I landed at about 10 o'clock at night. And my mom and my brother picked me up. I had my little ensemble on. I think they were kind of like, oh no, look at her. This is not good. And I walked out to the car. They drove me to my parents' house. I didn't want to go to my house, obviously, and I didn't feel safe on my own or even with myself. So we're dealing with two different feelings here. Not only do I not feel safe in the world, but I don't feel safe with myself. I went to my parents' house and was immediately just wrapped in love. There were notes from my parents and family on the guest room bed that said, just welcome home, we love you. There were drawings from my nieces, and it was very sweet. And I also just felt like I'm back at mom and dad's. I love mom and dad. You just feel like you're back to square one, but that's where I had to go. And I was there, stayed there for 8 months, didn't unpack that carry-on suitcase. And we figured it out in an extremely, extremely messy way. How did I look when I got off the airplane?
Oh, Allyn, I always think you're beautiful, but you were not at your best. Well, first of all, it was your brother came with me. It was midnight and you had sunglasses on, so that's a think you wore them on the plane and everything. So you just looked shocked. You know what? You were shocked. You were betrayed. You were in grief. You were sad. It was just like, what the heck has happened?
I know. I was thinking about this last night, actually, and I remember actually that one time that I came back from the wedding and I said I actually wore sunglasses back that time. I have a photo of myself on the plane wearing sunglasses, and I wore sunglasses back that time, and I wore sunglasses back this time also, and I was like, that's a red flag for people. If you're having to wear sunglasses to cover up
Yes.
your emotions, it's not a good relationship.
Or if you're sitting by someone on an airplane that's wearing sunglasses, understand they might be going through a difficult day.
They're having a bad day. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it might, it's not always a hangover or something. It can be, because I remember that one day I had just basically had a panic attack and just in that bathroom or in the mother's room for freaking ever when he left me at the airport for that long, and then came home, and that's when I finally talked to you about everything. And then also, when I came home after everything had happened, and I wasn't my best, but I was like, this is how I'm going to get home, is with my sweatsuit and sunglasses.
And you know what? It was just fine. You got home. I'm grateful for people on the other end that helped you get to the airport and get there and get home and get safe. And, you know, it was rough. The first week you were just in shock, like what just happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it broke my heart, you know, and the life that you thought you were going to have in the future just got yanked out away from you, and not just yanked out, but blown to smithereens. And you were just confused, like, what next? What am I doing? Where am I going? Da, 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 da. And it's like, we just kept trying to convince you, just breathe one day at a time. Let's just take it. And you got a lot of life ahead of you, and it's yours to decide where you're going and what you're going to do with it. Nobody else's, but you got to get through the first, and it was rough getting through the first weeks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, trauma does that.
A lot came out after I got home, and a lot came out after.
Mm-hmm.
And I obviously came to realize through a lot of therapy and stuff what was right and what was wrong and what had happened that was very much so not right. And I had to talk to you guys about that stuff. Mm-hmm. Finding out about that. What was that like for you?
It was really sad. I mean, you know, your kids are your kids, and you just want to protect them and keep them safe from bad things happening to them. And you can't 100%. You just give them the tools and let them know that you're always there, so that when it does, what do we do to heal from it? How do we address it? How do we not shove it under the carpet, but actually acknowledge it, talk through it, and move forward from it and learn from it? Bad things happen to a surprising number of people, unfortunately. So being able to talk to family, good friends, therapists, whomever, it's critically important that not to hold that stuff in, because I feel like I'd rather call it a survivor than a victim, but whatever word you want to use is made to feel bad for, like, well, how'd you let this happen? It's like, it's not your fault. It's not the person being manipulated's fault. I mean, when evil comes up against you, it's not your fault. I mean, so it's just really important to have the outlets to say this happened and not be ashamed or not anything. Just, you know what? Just let's work through it. So anyway, still makes me sad, but it's life, and we go through life, and good things happen and bad things happen. And
there's that positive spin.
I am always positive. I know it drives people crazy, but they do. But I think you have to address when something bad happens and figure out for yourself how you get yourself through it, so that you get to control your life and you get to have the life that you want to live, not have something dictated by what somebody else did to you. But you've got to address that before you can move forward. And just letting others know, gosh, if something's going on or something doesn't feel right, turn to whoever you trust and talk. You're not going to be judged for it. You're just going to be helped or supported.
Really, what I was experiencing and going through is betrayal trauma. Psychologist Jennifer Freud, she says betrayal trauma occurs when a person's trust is violated by a person or system that they rely on for survival. In other words, when you trust a person or institution to provide for you physically, mentally, and or emotionally, and they aren't able to do so, or if they end up harming you instead, this can have a significant and lasting impact. And that it did. It is the plane effect that I said, I think last episode, of just feeling booted out of the plane with no parachute, and like he's just waving by and closes the door, and you are trying, find the pull cord, you can't, and you're just, how do I survive? You brace for impact, you impact, and somehow, by some grace of God, you survive. And it's like, where do you start first? And I know I've said it before, but I'm a shameless fan. I don't care. There's a Zach Bryan song, and there's a line, and it's, talks about, you've been stabbed in your body. Won't you tell me where you're bleeding from? And it's that vibe of like, where do you triage first with this? And I think that was the early days. I remember the very first night at my parents', it's like, you're here, you're safe, let's get you to sleep. And I just couldn't sleep. I knew I was physically safe, but I couldn't sleep. And you just ruminate, and you run. You're still mentally running, and you will be for a very long time. I went to the doctor the next day. I went to my therapist the next day. Something I recommend, if you can or have the support, is to have someone go with you. My mom went with me to these, and at this point in time, it was like, you've been cut to your deepest core. Everything for me was out on the table. Am I a fully grown adult woman who has been handling all my own care and everything since I was old enough to, even before driving, I think, just with my chronic health stuff, I was doing my own appointments and everything, yes. But this is a whole other ball game, and I was not receiving information. I was not hearing things. I was unable to speak for the most part. And so that's something I would say in general too, and even just from a chronic health standpoint, I always am such an advocate for having someone else go with you to appointments if you can, just for a second set of ears. But in this case, it's even more important because I couldn't speak for myself, and I also was not hearing or processing anything that they were saying. And so whoever it is, if you have that as a resource, I would highly recommend that. And I'm just, there was nothing to hide. Everything was out in the open, and I also wanted it to be out in the open. I'm like, I'm so tired of secrets and things not being out there that I don't care. And there were a lot of hard conversations. I think the main concern in general was not sleeping, and that was with my doctor in general, was that, at a base level, you can't even answer where do you go next if you aren't able to function properly and, eat, sleep. I want to say that's about it. I mean, you want to be getting movement in, but you can't even be doing these things if you need to fuel and rest your body, and I wasn't able to do either. So we had to address those things, and something that is a very personal choice for me is that I did not want to go on any form of heavy medication that was discussed in terms of mood stabilization or anything like that. I instantly and obviously knew that I was in a depression and had extreme anxiety. I wouldn't be diagnosed with complex PTSD until months and months later, but I I knew that these were things I was facing, and I just did not want to go on those things. My mindset, and I want to be very clear that everyone's journey is their own. This is not medical or mental health advice. This is my own experience with it, and I want to be as transparent with that as possible, is that I felt like I didn't want to bandage things and have to deal with more down the road when I come off of it. Part of this decision as well is that I had and have in the past been on medications, and I felt like I've come to a good place where I'm not on the amount that I have been on in the past. And so I'm very proud of that. That's been an accomplishment for me in getting my body off of things. And so I wanted to try and not go down that route if possible. I wanted to just feel through it and go straight through it if I could, even though I knew it would be extremely, extremely painful. I just was like, if I can sleep and get some strength back, that's a win. But either way you dice it, you can't take the pain away. And I didn't want to dole it away. I knew I couldn't do that. And so those were always options for me, but initially, and my doctor knows how I feel about these things. We've had a lot of conversations about, like, please don't offer me things or put me on things if I, don't have to. And we had these conversations. So that was my decision, is that we're going to try to do this and get me as stabilized as possible with the least amount of medications as possible, and just really kind of focus on the baseline of functioning as a human with your sleep, getting my appetite back up, and stuff like that. Was the, depression, anxiety an issue? Yes, we were monitoring that. That's when, we go into therapy. I'd been seeing my therapist for a long time. We just kind of created a plan and went to work on that. And the plan really was, I want to say it was a no plan. It was we're not putting pressure on you. We're here for you. We're going to show up and address this, but there's not pressure on it. There's not a timeline on it. And I think not having a timeline on your healing is the best thing that you could do. And I'm such a type A person, and having this happen right as I'm about to turn 30 and my friends are married with kids. I was planning on that in this relationship. You have these life goals and milestones that you're expecting, and everything felt like a loss and a setback. And I'm like, okay, well, when am I doing these things? For me to not have a timeline was the greatest gift I could have had, even though mentally I've always pushed myself in the healing aspect of things. But for other people to not put it on me is the greatest gift that I had throughout this process. So it really was a no plan plan. We're gonna get you in here into the office as much as possible, and we're gonna see what you need and how you feel every day, and it's always different. And so that was kind of that experience. And I will go through that more, but I do want to touch on, and I'm really just kind of thinking about right now and highlighting kind of really the day after coming home. And something that was discussed in both of those appointments is that and that developed over the following weeks, is that I began having suicidal ideations. And what that looked like and meant for me is that I knew that I would never, and I can truly say this, is that I would not hurt myself to the point of not being here. But in every sense of it, I did not want to be here. And the pain was so unbearable that I could not fathom going through it. And I could not see a way out. And I knew that it was not the answer. And I also know that when you're facing the depression, the anxiety, and even this betrayal, and you're trying to understand up and down and right and wrong, your mind does not always speak the same language as you. And so that's really where I flip-flopped, is that sometimes I'd be doing good, sometimes I wouldn't be doing good. And I couldn't bear it. It was the most, just cut me to my core pain, that I could not see a way forward with it, and trying to navigate that. And I had all the support in the world. I had all of that. And these things don't care about that. Your mind doesn't care, and your mind doesn't discriminate based on any of your resources or support or what you have, and it will play games with you. And so that's really where I was at. And I was very open about it. I talked about it, and I felt very guilty about it. I felt very guilty being around my family at that point in time and putting that burden, what I felt like was a burden, on them. And that was part of me saying I want to go away, because I don't want this to be on them. And the conversation was, it would probably do more harm than good to send you away or put you somewhere based on what you're dealing with. So they educated me, they educated my family on what to look for, what kind of conversations to have. And I just remember my mom, I mean, I was with my parents, my parents would come in and check in on me all the time. My mom was like, "Do you want me to sleep in here with you?" She slept in that room with me some nights. And I think that they were very high alert, and we just had a lot of open conversations. Sometimes were better than others. And it got to the point where I had to be very open and honest with myself as well. And I asked her to hold on to all of my prescriptions. I asked her to hold on to my shaving razor. And I did not drive a car for 2 or 3 months. And these are all just things that I began to identify as possibilities of not good scenarios. And I just said I need to eliminate them. And my mom would say, "Do we need to talk about this more?" And sometimes we would, and sometimes I'd say, "No, it's fine. I don't want to hold on to it. I can't carry it." And she'd say, "Okay." And I cannot thank them enough for that. I know the weight that that held on my family. It was just kind of what my process looked like, and eventually I came out of it. But the impact of this is far beyond a breakup, and it's not something that you just get over. And I wasn't working for a long time. I didn't for months. I had no capacity to show up for others or myself. I could hardly reply to texts or phone calls. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to be around anyone. It was just therapy, doctor follow-ups, and rest. And slowly over time, kind of little bits of being around family more. I don't think I spent time with a friend until at least a month or two in. But the greatest gift was no questions, no pushing, just space and support. And there's so much to say on these topics. And I can and will and would love to expand on them more. And I just want to say that if you are facing any of these things, that you are not alone. It's unfortunately far more normal. It's just far less discussed than we ever experience. And there are resources out there. There is support out there. You do not have to go through it alone. You are not crazy for feeling this way. There's nothing wrong with you for feeling this way. And you don't have to feel this way forever. It's not a forever thing. And it will get better. And I see you and I feel you in that. And there is hope. So I do want to put that out there. There's a quote from No Visible Bruises. And it says, "The long-term fallout from a lifetime of violence towards you is the rewiring of the brain geared solely and entirely towards survival. A brain that reacts to being under constant attack will continue to send danger signals. Increased levels of cortisol, adrenaline, and other stress hormones contributing to a vast constellation of physical and mental health issues. Disassociation is one of the most common issues, but victims of chronic violence can also have a wide and long-term range of problems from the emotional to the physical. They may have long-term cognitive loss, memory problems, or sleep disorders. They may suffer from irritability or inattention. Some researchers link a host of physical ailments to unresolved trauma, including fibromyalgia and severe digestive issues." I want to highlight this because it's so important. And I think that a lot of times I still do. I feel guilt and I feel pissed. I disassociated and was not myself and there was no one home. You can look at photos. There aren't many photos of this time. But I am a ghost of myself. Don't look like myself at all. And I feel guilty that I was not there and could not be there for family and friends. I was not present for being able to grieve my grandma. Her funeral was around this time. I was not functional. I went and was there, but am still like kind of grieving even now. I mean, now it's a year out and I'm kind of being hit with, oh my gosh, my grandma's not here. So it's hitting me now. It's a delayed reaction on that one, but I feel bad that I was not more present for that. My cousin was in the process of passing and did end up passing in these months that this all was going on. And I just feel guilt that I was not myself. And I feel really pissed that he took some of those moments from me. But I hear this quote. Also, this book is amazing. I really do highly recommend it. It helps to make it make sense. Hearing, that disassociation is a side effect helps me not feel like, oh, you just didn't have it together. It's like, no, your brain is really still trying to just survive, is feeling like it's constantly still under attack and is trying to rewire for where you're currently at. So I hope that gives people also grace for themselves. Grace for myself in this period was essentially non-existent and still is something that I wrestle with a lot. It's like, why don't you just get back to normal life? But there is no normal life. There is nothing normal about this. So I do hope that provides a little bit of help for people, because I would just ruminate 24/7 and try to make it make sense. And it's a losing battle. I will say that. So I would just ruminate, lose sleep, try to make it make sense, kind of try to be awake a little bit and be a human during the day. But I look back and I'm like, who was she going through this experience? And I never identified him as a narcissist. I never identified the abuse or anything in the early days of this. This was just my reality, and I was trying to put the pieces together. And Dr. Amani says all domestic abusers are narcissistic, without exception. The capacity to tell someone, I love you, I'm going to care for you, we are in a relationship, and then emotionally, physically, or sexually assault them. That's zero empathy. That's a tremendous amount of entitlement, arrogance. That's narcissism. So I began to kind of put some of this together more and more as I learned more and more about him. More and more was coming out, but I was still kind of in this push and pull of things. I did still have a connection to his family. For about a month after, had been communicating still. His ex was reaching out. I was talking to her a little bit. I had been talking to his sister almost every day. Our parents had talked a little bit, both of our parents. And I was not really catching what all was going on. My parents, I'd be on the couch, my parents would come up and say, we talked to his parents, or we talked to his mom or whatever. And I was like, oh my gosh, mortified, and also just kind of in shock. Everyone was just sad that this happened, and they were embarrassed and felt terrible, and it was just a weird time. It didn't stop. I got a letter from his dad. I got a card from his mom. I eventually got a box from him of some of my stuff, not all of it, which felt like a gut punch, felt like a control move. And it was just thing after thing, and it was described to me as a car crash, just a repeated one. My therapist kind of talked to me about this, and it was just something new every week, and I would go in and be like, why can I not, I'm not getting anywhere, I'm not moving forward. And her kind of thought and explanation on it is like, well, you're getting hit with something every week. So this ended, but it was just hit after hit after hit kept coming. And it truly was, there was stuff that just kept coming for months, honestly, well into December, I would say. And I was grieving, but then it was another death and disaster. And it was this cycle, and it was just hitting. And I couldn't get anywhere, and I couldn't get out of it. And it was like coming out of the impossible situation of healing this betrayal trauma, but then you're still feeling betrayed by all these things, and you can't navigate and move forward. So juggling these feelings, emotions, people, things, a state of sadness, shock, grief, and a lot of people were angry, very rightfully so. The anger for me really didn't hit for a while, because I think I was just dumbfounded and sad that the world is this way and that I had this happen, and it's just terrible. But the anger did not hit until I found this Facebook group, and I had been referred to join by his ex-girlfriend, girlfriend, whatever the phrase is. And again, I found out about this because she had, the very first time she reached out, sent me all these screenshots of women who had been with him and claimed that, but also not only claimed it, but provided proof of their conversations and interactions with him. It was always just too much. There was far too much going on. I never touched it, and I had been home for a little bit, and just, it's like, you need to know everything. I needed to make it make sense, and I did. I looked, and it was Pandora's box. It was absolute insanity. And this was where I found out and confirmed everything about all the other women who had been with him, and there were dozens and dozens, and across different states. And so not only did it confirm everything, but it just made everything make much more sense. I would love to expand on this. I also want to kind of still respect it and protect it, and so I can't get into it too much. I think people probably know about it. I am not going to touch on it a ton, but this is where I found out a great deal of things, but also in personally talking to those women and having those conversations. And in general, again, timeline, everything just lined up to a T. And so weekends where he went completely off the grid and I didn't hear anything, it was confirmed that there were women who said, oh, I was at his house, we slept together, or he was at someone else's house, slept with them at their house. When my intuition peaked on that work trip that he was on, that there was something or someone, there was a woman who said I was talking to him on Tinder, who was in the town that he was in. He was trying to get me to come to his hotel room. He got extremely vulgar, and I didn't go, but saw the messages, and I was just dumbfounded. So let it be known that your intuition's always right. And sometimes when he would leave me on red, he was with women. Obviously, when my grandma passed, who was with his ex at that game. he had a few kind of tagline messages that he would send to women. The good mornings, the good morning beautifuls, the dream woman, which is, what I shared early on. But that was sent to many. Messaging girls, I would look at timestamps and I was like, wait, we were together at that time. And then I'd look at the calendar and say, wait, what were we doing? And I was like, oh, we were at his parents, or we were with his parents, or we were doing this. And sure enough, he'd be messaging girls at that same time. In general, it just piled up. There's so much here, and I'm like, Allyn, be the bigger person. The puzzle filled in rather quickly, and it was sad to read. It was hurtful to read. It made me angry more than anything that it was a cycle and it's a pattern, and it went back years and years and years and years and spanned across such a distance. And so that is where I said, wait, it's not me. It's not just me. It's not just her. It's all these other people. And it's not just this time frame that, yes, you were with me and her and all these other women during the time frame that we were together, but you've also had this pattern of doing this for a long time. And there are women who had commented saying, oh, when I was, whatever, such a long time ago, this happened. And it puts it together, and you start to see how deep and dark and carefully woven the web is. And it just is horrifying. And the only thing that I can say is that I am grateful for it, because it helped to solidify where I was at in my journey of healing, and that this is a bad person. This is no one that I want to be around. I obviously didn't, miss the boat on this. And just finding empowerment with other women who had experienced this and who were backing that up and supportive. And you can't not believe it. It's not a bashing ceremony or place or whatever we want to call it. It was just facts. It was, this is what it is here. Look at it. If you don't want to look at it, that's fine. But this is what happened, and you can't ignore that. And so I appreciate that it helped me in that sense. Just kind of helped me strengthen my backbone with it and stand a little bit taller. And I met some amazing women through it that I am still in contact with and am just grateful for. There are quite a few who wanted to come on and who I would have loved to have on. And I've said it before that there are just some concerns in terms of safety and stuff. And I wish that was not the case. So I have been doing this show in honor of them and for them. But there is someone who is, how to word this, just willing and feels compelled and who wants to come on and share. And so I'm very grateful for her. We are going to keep her anonymous, but we're going to go ahead and bring her on and talk about her experience with him and in meeting me and kind of what that all looked like. So we're going to go ahead and bring her on. Love what you're hearing? Leave us a review. If the When Heaven Meets Hell podcast has resonated with you, left an impact, or sparked any type of feels, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your reviews help spread the word, reach more people, and continue the mission of breaking cycles and empowering women. While I started this show on my own, I know I am not alone. This one's for the girls, as they say, and every form of conversation, review, and sharing helps to reach another sister experiencing the same and spread the message that these behaviors will no longer be tolerated. So take a moment to leave a review on any platform you may be listening on. It makes a huge difference, and your voice does matter. Thank you for being part of this community and for helping others discover the power of these conversations. What was our first communication?
You and me?
Yeah, and so I just looked back, and my very first message to you, I said, "This is random. I'm curious why you requested me. I don't know if you have connection to some wild stuff that just happened with my boyfriend." I said, "Are you by chance related to any of that?" And then I had talked to her, and she told me, yeah, she was a name dropper, so I know she had dropped
Yeah.
my name. She ended
She
up
gave me your
dropping
name.
your name. Yeah,
Yep.
she was a name dropper. So she had talked to me and said, I was scared at first, and I talked to some other women who were going to contact you. And so then I understood who you were, and that, you apparently were asked to reach out to me. Um, and then that's kind of how it happened. But I think when you first requested me, I was so on guard because it was a very similar thing to her,
Right. And you're like,
dropping me
who's this
a thing.
bitch?
And exactly. I was like,
Yeah.
not another one.
Well, and I was almost like already was like, I need to get a hold of this person. She was like so intense. I was like, I need to get a hold of you to be like, how are you dealing with this girl? Like, are you okay? Like, well, because it made it
How long
sound like
had
she was like
you
stalking you.
Okay, what led you to how long had you been interacting with her at that point? Because I had been about maybe 20, gosh, I don't even know if it had been 24 hours, my interaction with her.
And
Been
that,
under
so
that.
I remember,
I
I bet it was a week at least, probably. She had called me a couple of times, and then I just remember her calling my phone while I was at work. And I was like, dude, I
okay.
can't answer you at work. Like, what the heck? So then I went on a walk at lunch, and I was like, she's like, call me ASAP. And so I called her, and I remember walking around the park, and I'm like,
Yeah.
what's going on, man? And she was having like a meltdown. And so part of me was just like, trying to tell her kind of same thing, like, dude, this dude is not good. He's not a good human being.
Yeah.
Like, uh, and I knew that she had been in a relationship with him. And then she was telling me about like the underwear she found in the car and the card. And she's like, but I don't think it's this other girl's because she doesn't even live here. It's probably a different one. And so, and I was like, what are you talking about, the girl who doesn't live here? And then she name dropped you, and she's like, if you go to this city,
Oh
there's only
my
so many girls with
god.
your name, right? You know?
There's probably like
So,
none in the world, yeah, with my
yeah,
name.
it was like really easy to find you, like really easy. I was more like trying to see how you were going to handle dealing with her. And if she's like in danger, I was a little bit worried about the danger aspect because this man is obviously lying to everyone. He's a manipulator. He's very, very good at speaking to women and getting what he needs out of the conversation. Like, hello baby, hey baby, how are you? And then you melt a little bit. Like we have good families. Like I don't know why we fall for this, but like he knows what he's doing.
I want to go back to you guys knowing each other first, but how did you and her first meet?
Do you know
So,
how I met first?
well, I do want to do that, but I feel like we're kind of on a roll with like her.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I want to talk about how you guys first connected that week. You said I kind of met her like a week prior. Like, what led to you guys interacting first? How did you
So
connect
it
with
had
her
to have
first?
been I put his picture up on that page was like the very first step because I was like I remembered meeting the guy and
Okay.
I was like this he was like a sketchy dude back then and I was like I don't feel super good about meeting this guy again. I think he's kind of douchey is what my brain was thinking like right off the bat. I was like something is off. So I just posted him on that page
Okay.
and she was the first answer, and the first answer
Mm,
said, this is my fiance of 4.5 years, we have 2 dogs, we live yada yada right by you. And she's like, what
great.
have you done with him? Like, and we have a kid,
Yes.
or she has a kid.
Yeah.
And what have you done with him? And I was like, girl, I haven't seen him for 10 years. We had one date and it was terrible. And then she's like, can I call you? And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I guess so. You can text me. And so then she started texting, but her texts weren't like one and done. I mean, she was like blowing up my phone, like like
Yes.
blowing up my phone. And I was like, girl, I got stuff to do. So I
Yeah.
would like respond as well as I could, but then it started showing into like just more things. Like she would just tell me this whole thing about,
Mm-hmm.
her, and then how he's a cheater, but he lives with her, and she knows he's cheated, but he's changing, or and then she talked about his family a little bit, and his sister is mad at her or something, and like it sounds like the
Yeah.
family is like also kind of toxic, but like not on her side of things.
Mhm. Yeah, there's not.
Like
Yeah, there's a great deal of tension there with
with
them, and
there, and it's like
I never knew the full story behind that.
with the family. And then she did go on to tell me about how she had the wedding that she was supposed to go to, and she wasn't invited later, and some other girl was there with him, right? And
Oh, is that me? Sorry.
that was
Yes.
you. That was you. And
Yeah.
she said that she must have literally, I think the reason she knew you were there is she went to the pictures of the photos, and then she looked up all the tagged people and all the photos and went through all their photos on Facebook until there was one with like you two in the background.
I looked like
Like,
shit at that wedding. I was never
but
tagged in. So I
like
don't think I looked
I
like that much
mean,
of a threat, but
the girl should be an FBI agent. Like,
yeah, and I think that that speaks to kind of what these relationships do to you, mentally and emotionally. And I always felt
yeah.
like, yeah, she very strung out. And I know that you just want answers, and I'm not faulting her for that. I, uh, yeah, I was never tagged in anything. I did go to that event with him, and the interesting thing too that I think is that and I talk about this in the episode, is that I had taken photos. His mom had taken photos of him and I at that wedding. And then I said, "Oh, let me get some of you and your mom." It was a beautiful backdrop. I took some photos of him and his mom, and I would always send him photos of our times together. And she said, when once I talked to her more and everything, she said, "Well, yeah, and he sent me photos of him and his mom at that wedding." And I said, "Well, I took those." And so he would basically take anything that I would send him of our time together and then send it to her to prove that he
Went.
was doing what he said he was doing. Yeah, he said, I just went to this with my mom and dad. I'm spending time with my parents, or, things like that. And so, he was working both of us over.
Yeah.
To me, he was like a charming boyfriend spending time with me and his parents. And to her, it was, oh, it's a weekend with him and his parents. And, I don't know what he totally, had told her, but there's a lot going on.
Well, and I do feel like none of this is her fault.
Yeah. Can you go back to your time meeting him, and kind of what you've always been looking for, what you were looking for, what that looked like in meeting him and your interactions with him?
So, yeah, it was right when I moved back to town, and this is my
Okay.
hometown. And like, I had just gone through a breakup with someone sort of similar, like, just very beautiful man. And I had a hard time leaving that. And he, like, kind of just ghosted out, like, disappeared out of my life, and I was heartbroken, and I was like, I just, I'm going to try to be on the dating scene and try to look for someone, to be a best friend that I can be with. But anyways, he popped up, and his pictures were like, Montana, like I'm a skier kind of dude, and I was like, cool. He was like floating on the river in one. He was wearing red, white, and blue, so he likes America. Great. So I was like, cool. Like down to earth
He's
guy,
an
whatever.
American.
He's an American
Okay.
man. And I was like, he's cute. He's
Okay.
got nice teeth. So
He does have
bonus. And
good
I was
teeth.
like, yeah. So he was kind of like, hey, do you want to go out downtown and we can, have some drinks, maybe have some dinner? And I was like, sure. So
So this was on the apps. I just want to.
this was on the apps. I don't
Okay.
even
Okay.
think,
Okay.
I don't know that he had a phone number for me for the first meeting, because I was not doing that at the
Interesting.
time.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we just were on apps. And then
Okay.
I think we had matched on several apps at this time. But I was like, that sounds good.
Classic.
So I got all dolled up. I was so excited. And then he lives in town. So I was like, whatever happens, I can just like, stay at my folks' house because it lives in town. He lives in town. So, or we're going
Mm-hmm.
out downtown. So I was like, all ready to go. And then all of a sudden, plans changed. And he's like, well, my roommates are at my house. Do you want to just come over here? And I was like, to start. And I was like, okay, to start, what can I bring? Like, I'm being kind and being like, what can I bring? So he's like, why
Mm-hmm.
don't you just get us a bottle of vodka to share with all of us? And I was like, okay. So I go and pick up a bottle of vodka and I come over. Him and his roommates. I don't know how that thing went down so fast. I feel like I had like a drink and the bottle was gone. And I was like,
You're so
okay.
nice. I'm just like, I can see this. I'm like,
Well, and I know
Allyn, she's so
exactly where
nice.
that is where I stopped. And I remember thinking like, I never shop here because it's an expensive place to buy alcohol. And so I went and I remember
Okay.
spending like $40 on this bottle of alcohol that was gone in 2 seconds.
Mm.
And so I
Yeah.
was like, all right. And it was just super awkward. It was like two awkward roommates and him and
Mm-hmm.
just kind of talking, hanging out, whatever. And then he's like, well, let's go downtown now. And I was like, okay, like for dinner. And he's like, well, let's go get drinks. And I was like, just the two of us. And I was like, well, since I didn't drink anything hardly, I'll drive. And
Okay.
so
Yeah.
that was fine. So we get down to my car and we're like halfway to town and he's like, "Oh no, I don't have my wallet. Like, do you want to pay for drinks and then I'll just, hit you back." I don't even think that like Venmo was a thing at this time.
Okay.
Like I think he's like, "When we get back, I'll go to an ATM or something." And I was like, "Okay." And then my brain started thinking like F this guy. Like I paid for the bottle of
Yeah.
booze, now I'm paying for all the drinks and dinner possibly. So I was like, "Oh, you know what? Probably you can't get into the bars probably without an ID. They're really strict on that now. So let's go back and get your ID and then I'll just pull up outside. You can run in and get it." And he's like,
There
"Oh,
you
okay,
go.
okay." So we go pull up, he runs inside and I drive off and I was like, bye.
You are so smart. I don't know if I would think of that. The
So,
people
and then
pleaser
he
in me
just
would
tried to
be
hit me
like,
back up and I just blocked him on everything and I was like, I'm not dealing with that. So fast forward 10 years later and he pops up, okay, maybe not 10 years, but like later, and he pops up on all the dating apps again. And I was like, I kind of remember the picture, but I didn't really remember what had happened. And
okay.
then what happened was we connected. We must have had our phone calls. We must have had texts on real life because when we connected and we started texting, I read through them and I was like, oh, it's this guy.
Oh no.
It's this guy.
Okay.
And so then I told him, I said, do you remember meeting me? And this is what happened. I don't think I want to meet up again. And then he
Mm-hmm.
played I am so sorry. I cannot believe that happened. I don't even remember that. I had a lot of growing up to do back then. I don't know what happened. And so he's like, I'd really like to make it up to you and let's
Yeah.
start over. And I was like, all right. And then I posted him on the app because I was like, I don't trust this guy.
There you go. Okay.
So
Okay. That's
we
so.
must have texted on real life because it connected the dots
Mm-hmm.
for me only after I could read the many years before that we matched up.
What had happened?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting that you had like your gut feelings that it just wasn't a good person
Well,
or
and I went with
or
it
thing.
because normally I am the worst picker in men. I mean, I still am terrible, but like for some reason there was something a little bit more like I was like, not good. And I'm getting better at it. I mean, you kind of have to be
Yeah.
in today's world,
Yeah. So
you know.
you posted in that group and then she was the first one because you weren't told like you were like maybe he's a maybe and then but you didn't
Well,
know
I
and then
was like,
she
yeah.
replied.
I was like, if
Okay.
nothing comes up of this, I was going to meet him. Like, I was going to meet
Yeah.
him. Like that
Yeah.
weekend or
Because
that night, even.
I've seen screenshots. I've, so many, but I've seen screenshots of your conversations with him, and it was I think you got the good morning, like beautiful messages, and he was like, "Let's go walk the puppies," and like you were
Yes. I
getting,
was so in,
yeah,
because he's got the dogs. And I was so
yeah,
like, yeah, let's do it. And we
you're,
live really close.
yeah, you're a dog lover too, and so you were
Yeah.
getting you were getting the you were just getting the force is what I can say, I guess, the force of the
Yeah.
attention too. Which is
Yep.
at the same time that I was full on like with him and that she was as well. And
And who knows how many others?
Yeah, our timing was all at the same time. So I, without fail, always got the good morning messages. That was
Well, and
something
even
too that
in the
was,
middle of the day. Because
yeah.
I keep remembering like, what does this man do for a living that he can text me like all throughout the day? Like I thought that was unusual.
To me, it's like an internal checklist he would go through, which is interesting because with me, he would kind of hold it over me and be like, and I lived by this narrative that he was super busy. So I would always get my good morning message. Maybe we would talk a little bit during the day, but then the evening is when like I would
Really
expect
hear
a
from
call,
him?
hope a call, hope to. I mean, once she was a part of the picture, we talked a lot less because she was usually around, or it was just the evenings were a lot worse, but I would without fail get a morning message and stuff. But um I think as I went through a lot of the screenshots and kind of saw how he was interacting with other women, I just feel like it was just this, in knowing kind of how these personalities work, it's like like checking off everything in the system to keep it
Like, did I
running
get
and
her? Did I
functioning.
get her? Did I get her? Like, how many good
Hmm.
morning beautifuls in one day can you send?
The limit does not exist. I know.
The limit does not exist. I
The
love
phone
it.
does not shut off. Yeah, the phone does
Right.
not shut off. I don't know how many, but there were a lot, and there were also the good morning dream woman, all these things. That was the very first message he sent to me was like, "Hey, dream woman," and that's too when I was like, "Oh, this is the same man that like this is a system. This is not a one-off. This is not like his first time doing this." I just love and adore you so much is that you really had my back when you didn't have to, you didn't know me. But I remember, because I was so guarded. I was guarded with everyone in my life, even myself after this. But I
Yeah.
remember this happened and I was home. I got home and I was just a shell. I was not a functional human. And I remember to your point, of just direct hit after direct hit of I was in the firing line of questioning from her, and
Yeah.
I in talking to her, it helped me to piece together things and it helped me to understand him more. So it was helpful for me, but also she had no boundaries around telling me things that I also didn't want to or need to hear, and it was every day
Mhm.
nonstop, and it never ceased. And I know that you made a few comments. You made an initial comment and you just said I'm worried about you talking to her, and no one else knew. Everyone in my family like knew and some of my friends knew, but no one else obviously had
The in
interacted
depth.
with her. Yeah, and so no one else had that experience, and I didn't know you. I didn't even know if I could trust you. I obviously like had no trust in people, but you said that and I just was like, I think this is a little mini like blessing. And then I remember I asked if I could talk to you more, and I just said I'm just curious why you would say that. And you kind of said
Yeah.
what you've said here, just. And I remember I was like in my parents' guest room. I stayed at their house for months, but I remember I was in there talking to you and you said you don't have to talk to her. And that was like such a relief off my shoulders because I was like, "Oh my god, you're right. I don't have to talk to her." And you said if you want to know anything, like I can talk to her for you, but like you were like, "I think it's better for you if you don't."
Like
And
just
I
get
just
that
had a
space.
guilt. Yeah, and I think I felt like I had an obligation to her, feeling like, "Oh my gosh, she's still in it. Like I know how bad it is. Like I want to help her get out." Like I had so many emotions, and for you to be like, "You don't have to do it." I think that was really like helpful and impactful for me. And so yeah, I would have never met you, and who knows where I would have been. But
And it's
right,
just like one gut punch after another.
there's no happy, and like they're not gonna have a happy ending. I didn't have a happy ending with him. Like there's no good ending. I mean, my happy ending is getting out. I wish that for
Yeah.
her and healing and stuff. And I know that's going to take a really long time. And for me, I still have a lot to do. But that is like, there's no good ending with people like this because they don't change. And I think that that's kind of the sad
Well, and you're
reality
talking
of it.
cycles, like the
Yes.
cycle is going to be started over, you know?
Yes. Well,
And
I think
it
that obviously
may,
she faced that.
a year from now, it could be three different people having this conversation, you know?
Well, you alone, like the fact that you had experienced him in one way and then such a long time later experienced him
Not
not in the
changing.
exact same way, but yeah, there was not a big difference there. If anything, it had escalated. I think that
Like
that
there was no
speaks
growing
volumes to
up in the
cycles.
process. Yeah,
There
there's
was
no growing up.
the growth had not happened. Yeah.
No.
What are your takeaways from this experience, or any words of advice to women in similar situations?
Trust your gut for sure. um, just know that you deserve more. Like if something is like, you know that you deserve more. If someone's like, let's go get drinks, you pay for that. Like,
I love that you did that, because even in myself, I'm like, I know that I'd probably be like,
it's
okay,
okay,
or I
it's
don't
okay.
know. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
love that you did that.
you gotta walk away sometimes. And you know what? We do deserve better. And you know what? The men deserve better who are better men.
Claps for that. Yeah, the standard needs to be higher.
That's my main thing is like, if you think something is going on, like something's probably not quite right. Like, in this stage, you got to be worried about your safety a little bit and always meet in a
Mm-hmm.
public place. Always have some
Mm-hmm.
extra cash, just in case you need to do. I did one of those the other day. I just went up to the bartender and said, "This is for my drinks. I'm going to leave. Don't tell him I left till like 5 minutes from now." You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
sometimes if you feel like you need to go, you need to go, but you need to sneak away and pay
Yeah.
for your drinks and go. And just be
Mm-hmm.
prepared
Yeah.
for if
Yeah.
something's
Be smart.
uncomfortable and it doesn't work, don't try to force it.
Those are huge. So thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really do appreciate that. I look back at my situation. I think, how different would it have been if I just leaned into that more, trusted that more. But I also just, it is hard, and you have to have grace for that and like where you've been and what you've been through. But I also, something too that went on in this, and I had such a distinct conversation with one of my friends, and I remember her saying, you can leave if you want to leave, or you can ask to take a break until he figures things out more with her or gets out of the house or something. And I remember saying, I'm so afraid that if I do that, I'll break him or he won't be there when I come back.
Yeah.
And to your point, I just think if it's truly the right situation or the right person, like, have confidence in yourself and in that situation, that if you do those things, like, they're going to be there and the right person will be there. And I know it's so hard. I wasn't obviously strong enough to do it in the moment, but
We
that I
invested
just
a
am
lot of
such,
yourself.
yeah, so much. And I was obviously being emotionally and physically, mentally manipulated. There were a lot of things, but uh the right person will be the right person and will never put you in a position to feel those things, or betray yourself at the expense of the relationship. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think we know, everyone's smart and knows these things, but it's just kind of, you get lost in the shuffle. So
Right.
I
Well,
yeah, love and appreciate your perspective.
yeah, silver lining, we're buds.
I know. I know. How freaking wild is that? I was like, this is so bizarre, but also thank God.
It's great that
I
there are women
just,
out there that you can trust, you know?
so that was our time together. That was someone who made a very big impact for me and my experience, and you can see why. And I think that there's a lot of ways to look at it, and you could easily say, don't trust or whatever. And I, for a long time, I didn't trust, but I am very grateful for her and how she helped me in this journey and kind of helped me to put my thoughts, feelings, emotions first and break some of these trauma bonds that I did have, and just also protect myself from this situation because it was a lot. So I am so grateful for her. She is someone who I can never forget. I will never forget. And I just can't speak highly enough. I think it takes a lot for someone to do that and to step in on someone else's behalf and say, hey, you don't have to tolerate this and you don't have to do this. And we really didn't know each other at all, but it really speaks volumes to who she is as a person. And so I am grateful for her throughout this process and the other women as well. So I just want to give a nod to you guys and just thank you for everything, because it has been a lot. So throughout this all, so much has come out, and there was one thing in particular, cheating aside, all of these things aside, there was one thing in particular that did come out, and I could not sit with it. I can't get into specifics, but it was something that I could not discuss, that I could not hold on to. I sat with for a while. I prayed about it. I talked to close loved ones about it. I said, I don't know what to do with this information. It's something that at the end of the day, had I held on to it in 5 years and still had it, I would feel guilt surrounding it, just in who it impacts and what it is. And I think it was just too big not to do something with. And so I ended up deciding to do something with it. And so we are going to go ahead and get into that on the next episode. Thank you for tuning in to When Heaven Meets Hell, produced by me, Allyn and Morongan, and co-produced, edited, and scored by Brad Parsons at Train Sound Studio. Although less than 1% of podcasts address domestic violence and survivor advocacy, When Heaven Meets Hell strives to change that narrative by raising awareness and promoting vulnerable conversations. You can support our mission by making sure you subscribe on your preferred platform, leaving a review, and sharing the show with others. We are so deeply grateful, and we'll see you next time on When Heaven Meets Hell.